This video is part 4 in a series that provides an overview of the National Folklore Archive Initiative, NFAI, and an introduction to the function and content of its Folklore Collections Database, FCD. Video 4, Creating Repository Records. In this video, we'll discuss how to create a record in the FCD for your repository. What do we mean by a repository? Looking at the definition of the term provided by the Society of American Archivists Glossary of Archival and Records Terminology, a repository is a site in custody of, or in possession of, a body of archival materials. A repository is not necessarily the owner of the materials it houses, although this is often the case. Repository records are a vital part of the FCD. By creating an accurate, up-to-date repository record, you'll make it possible for users of the FCD to locate your archival materials and to get information about how to contact you about accessing them. The first record you should create when beginning to use the FCD is the record for your repository. We'll start by reviewing how a repository record looks to front-end users of the FCD. Starting at the FCD homepage, click on the arrow next to the Browse button in the upper left of the screen and select Repositories. This opens up a pop-up window containing an alphabetical list of all the repositories identified in the database. For the sake of an example, I'm going to select an already completed repository record and go over the component parts. The Center for Pennsylvania Culture Studies. At the top of the record, you can see the repository name and the identifier automatically generated by the system. All the remaining information is entered by the cataloger on the back end, including a name, an alternative name, state, a narrative description of the repository and its holdings, and contact information so users of the FCD know how to access the materials held by the repository. In addition, you can see a linked list of all the collections and items belonging to the repository that have already been entered into the FCD. Next, we're going to create a new repository record using the cataloging interface. From the cataloging interface homepage, click on the New menu and select Repository. This is the data entry form for a repository. Looking over at the left side of the screen, you can see the 4 components of a repository record: Basic Info, Contact Info, Relationships, and Summary. You must enter the relevant data into each form and save it before you're able to move on to the next form. Not every form will necessarily be needed for each repository. However, at minimum, you will need to fill in the Basic Info and Contact Info as completely as possible. I'm going to start filling in info for a fictitious repository, beginning with the Basic Info form. Starting with the repository name, an alternate name, a name by which the repository is also known, there are different types of names, alternate or used for. We'll just select alternate. You can add a whole bunch of alternate names by hitting that Add Name button. There are many types of repositories that are represented in the FCD. You can see some here. We're going to select Academic Library, Archives, Museum for this place. And we're going to say that the Miskatonic University Library Special Collections is in Massachusetts. Next, I'm going to fill in the repository description. This is a brief narrative description of the repository and its holdings. Often it's easier just to cut and paste this. For the sake of the example, I'm going to type it in. Usually it comes from some official material like a website or a brochure. Description source, we'll say it comes from the university brochure. Repository contact, the name of the primary contact for the repository. Here we'll say it's Dr. Henry Armitage, and then his title. These last 2 fields relate to accessing records in the database. We're just going to ignore them for now, and then we're going to save the form. So that's the basic form. Now we're going to move on to the contact info form. address, telephone number, email for contact, and the URL. Once I'm done typing, I'll hit the Save button to save the form. So next, let's run down some of the other forms associated with repository record. Relationships are links to related objects and other repositories. Those will get made as you work with materials. The summary is a brief overview of the record. And the log is a running list of changes that have been made to the record. So with that, let's go take a look at this record on the front end. Back at the FCD homepage, go to the Browse button there, Repositories. There's our pop-up window. Scroll down until we get to our example record. There we go, Miskatonic University Library Special Collections. Here's the record, and there's all the data we entered. The only thing that's missing from this are the related objects, and those will get added as we continue to work through this video series. So there you go. There's your repository record.